At our daughter's baby shower, my husband's words cut through the happy conversation, and silence descended like a thick curtain. A young woman, perhaps 30 years old, in the corner awkwardly raised her glass of mimosa and waved. Our friends and family sat motionless, their faces ranging from my daughter Jennifer, who is 7 months pregnant with our first grandchild, looked up from the small pair of booties she had just unwrapped. Her face crumpled, and I put my hand on her shoulder out of instinct. "I'm happy you found your path," I said to my husband of 38 years, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. I gave Jennifer a gentle shoulder squeeze. The May sunshine felt warm against my face as I stepped outside the Columbus, Ohio Community Center, whispering, "I'll call you later." I am Teresa Callahan, 61, a retired school librarian who witnessed my marriage publicly fall apart, but I wasn't as devastated as everyone else in the room. I slid into my car, a sleek new Lexus that Gregory had complained was too expensive for a retiree, and took out my phone. With trembling fingers, I sent a text message with a secure link and the simple words, "You might want to check this when you have a moment." That room might have assumed this because I'd known for months. I knew exactly what Gregory was seeing when he burst out of the building in my rearview mirror, his face flushed and fumbling with his phone. I had documentation of every financial move I'd made over the previous 3 months, including the fact that the Sandusky vacation house was now solely in my name. Our joint savings had been carefully and legally redistributed, and my lawyer had protected my retirement accounts under a trust. When my husband said that financial matters were too complicated for me to understand, I believed him. However, people can change, people can learn, and people can prepare. My phone started to ring, and Gregory's name flashed on the screen. Years ago, this would have been unthinkable. I was the woman who had to ask permission to buy a new dress, and who gave my teacher's paycheck for better management. I ignored the screen, turned off the phone, and drove off toward the opulent apartment I had secretly rented the previous month. I realized something was amiss last Christmas, when we were having our customary family meal with Gregory, Jennifer, her husband Thomas, our son William, who had flown in from Portland, and a few close friends. I was in the kitchen making dessert, when I remember putting down the knife I was using to cut apple pie, wiping my hands on my apron, and taking a deep breath. After 37 years of marriage, you develop an intuition that this wasn't a coworker. This wasn't innocent. This was something else. Gregory's phone, which was left carelessly on the counter, lit up with a message that read, "Missing you already." Last night was perfect. The sender's name was Angela B. Gregory, who had been consistent in his routines, had become unpredictable. Monthly fishing trips had been extended to every weekend. Late nights at the office increased despite his alleged preparation for retirement from the investment firm, where he had worked for 30 years. Credit card statements revealed one evening in February. He said to me without looking up from his newspaper, "Is everything all right?" I nearly laughed at the irony. "Just thinking about our future," I replied honestly, and Gregory nodded absently. "Don't worry about that. I've got plenty of other things to do. Dinner charges at restaurants are too fancy for business meetings, always for exactly 2 people. For decades, I trusted him to manage our finances because he was a successful investment advisor with millions of dollars under his belt. He used his favorite phrase, "I have everything under control," when we bought our first house, when we invested in his company's stock options, and when we made decisions regarding our children's education. When I watched him pretend to read that newspaper while his mind was obviously elsewhere, I realized something significant. Gregory might be having an affair, but his true betrayal had been keeping me financially ignorant for decades. That was a power imbalance I could no longer tolerate. For clients, what did I know about money? I was just a school librarian who loved books and kids. I scheduled a meeting with Valerie Peterson, a financial advisor who was suggested by my friend Dorothy, who had gone through a challenging divorce years prior. Valerie listened intently as I described my circumstances and my suspicions. She asked me how long I had been married, looking over the documents I had brought in June, and in all that time you had never had your own accounts. I shook my head, in embarrassment. Gregory always said that managing everything together was more efficient. Mrs. Callahan, you need a crash course in taking charge of your financial life. Valerie had said, you need to move quickly but carefully, with her glasses up on her nose. The following month was a blur of paperwork, meetings, and covert financial practices. I met with Elizabeth Winters, a lawyer who specialized in high-asset divorces, and I collected, copied, and listed all of our assets. I discovered that Ohio is an equitable distribution state, which means that, in a divorce, marital property would be divided fairly, though not always. As a teacher, you helped put food on the table while raising your kids, so you have every right to an equal share. Elizabeth clarified that you had contributed to this marriage for almost 40 years. What shocked me was learning that Gregory had amassed far more wealth than I had anticipated, in addition to our primary residence and vacation home. He kept all this from me? I asked, stunned, as I looked at the statement totals. Financial concealment is unfortunately common, Elizabeth said gently. But knowledge is power, and now you have both. I had no idea about investment properties, stock portfolios, or retirement accounts with balances that made my eyes widen. Equipped with this new knowledge, I carefully followed the advice of my legal team. I opened my own bank accounts, started moving money from our joint accounts strategically and gradually rather than all at once, which could appear vindictive, updated beneficiary designations on insurance policies, obtained copies of tax returns, investment statements and property deeds, and, most satisfying of all, transferred our vacation. I transferred a lakefront cottage in Sandusky that had been my ideal retirement residence into my name alone, which was entirely lawful considering the way the property had been titled. During this process, I kept up the appearance of normalcy at home by cooking Gregory's favorite meals, listening to his tales of employment, and nodding understandingly when he grumbled that he was too busy for our customary Sunday dinners with the children. Even though I knew that fishing meant staying at a boutique hotel in Cincinnati with Angela B., I pretended to be disappointed when he announced another weekend fishing trip. Meanwhile, Jennifer's pregnancy progressed, and she asked if I would help host her baby shower. I threw myself into the planning, thankful for the distraction. We decided on a spring garden theme, organized games and decorations, and sent invitations. To even after months of suspicion and planning, Gregory seemed content that I was busy, which made it easier for him to disappear undetected. What I didn't expect was that he would use our daughter's celebration as the occasion for his announcement. That degree of callousness surprised me, but in a way, it made the next step much simpler. My new apartment was simple. It was sleek and modern, with no antiques or floral prints in sight, and it was nothing like the traditional colonial house Gregory and I had shared for 26 years. After Gregory's 7th call, I hung up the phone and poured myself a glass of the Columbus skyline. This place symbolized the new Teresa, someone I was still getting to know. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," I said, as I sipped the pricey Cabernet I had bought with my new credit card. I also enjoyed the silence and the realization that I had finally taken charge. The following morning, reality set in when Jennifer called, her voice heavy with tears. "Mom, what's happening?" "Dad returned to the shower after you left, but he wouldn't explain anything. Said, 'I didn't want this to happen. Are you and the baby okay?' 'We're all right,' she added. 'But your father claims you've taken everything, and that you planned this by emptying accounts without telling him. Is it true that I closed my eyes with a twinge of regret? Not for what I had done, but for the impact it had on our I've protected what's rightfully mine after 38 years of marriage. So that's all you need to know right now, Jennifer. However, why didn't you tell me something wasn't right at the baby shower? It wasn't about me. It was about you and my grandchild. And I never thought your father would pick that time to announce his, despite everything, the school librarian. And I emerged and I said, William, please watch your language. Automatically. I had promised to visit her later that week, but I hung up and snatched myself for the next call, which came from William, our son, Mom. What the hell is going on, Dad? He's totally losing it. He showed up at my hotel room at midnight, ranting about how you've stolen his retirement. Father is upset because he is dealing with unanticipated repercussions. What are the repercussions, Mom? He claimed that you moved the lake house to yourself, which is really cold. I had a sudden outburst of rage. What would you call telling everyone in your social circle that you're cheating on your wife when you're pregnant? There was a lengthy silence during the daughter's baby shower. Wait, what? Did Dad not tell me that part? Of course he hadn't. Gregory had always been selective with information, a trait I was now using myself. I called and texted worried, friends and family members for the remainder of the day. Some were horrified by Gregory's actions, while others were shocked by my financial situation. Maneuvers. Dorothy, my best friend from our teaching days, arrived with takeout Chinese food and a bottle of champagne. She raised her glass in celebration, saying, I've been waiting 30 years for you to stand up to that pompous ass. I laughed in spite of myself. Have you truly disliked Gregory all this time? Dorothy's expression softened. As we ate straight from the containers, I told Dorothy about my plans and that I would be meeting with my lawyer again tomorrow. Gregory had already contacted his own attorney. I didn't like how he minimized you, how he controlled every dollar, took credit for your accomplishments, and blamed you for his failures. You deserve better, Teresa. Illustrated, Are you afraid? As Dorothy was departing, I thought about the question. I feel strong for the first time in decades, but I'm not terrified, sad, or angry. I slept better that night than I had in months. The following morning, I got to Gregory's attorney. Has been in touch, she said, motioning for me to sit when I arrived at Elizabeth's office downtown and saw her waiting solemnly. They're contesting the property transfer and claiming you acted in bad faith, she said. Will that present an issue? My confidence wavering a little, I said. It makes things more difficult. But we've done. Gregory is claiming financial hardship, which I almost choked on. Everything was properly documented and filed, and the lake house was transferred through legal channels. Nevertheless, they are demanding an urgent hearing for temporary financial orders. Gregory makes over $300,000 a year. Elizabeth spread a number of documents across her desk, including credit card statements with balances in the tens of thousands, a personal loan with an outrageous interest rate, and a second mortgage on our primary residence that I had never signed for. How is this possible? I whispered. Yeah, but according to his filing, he has significant debt obligations. The pieces suddenly fell into place as I looked at the evidence of yet another betrayal, my hands shaking. There's more, Elizabeth said gently. Gregory's girlfriend, Angela Blackwood, was a former client of his firm and had been the subject of an ethics investigation for almost 6 months. Gregory's increasingly erratic behavior and his insistence that retirement was still years away, despite our initial plan was to retire together. But when I started having frequent arguments about money, It seemed like he had been hiding financial issues all this time, leading me to believe he was the expert. Elizabeth confirmed this. And there's more to know. The firm is considering firing him for having an inappropriate relationship with a client. If they discover evidence that he mismanaged her finances, he might lose his license. I concluded 4. A brief moment. I felt vindicated. But then I realized coldly that if Gregory lost his job and income, it might affect the divorce settlement I would get. What does this mean for me? I asked. It means we need to adjust the good news is that you've already secured significant assets. The bad news is that there may be less to divide than we initially thought. As I was leaving Elizabeth's office, I turned to see Gregory's black BMW parked across the street. Gregory stepped out as I got close to my car and called, "Teresa?" His voice echoing across the street. Parking lot. We need to talk. I paused, then turned to face him. He looked awful, with bloodshot eyes and unshaven hair, dressed in the same clothes from the baby shower. What happened to Gregory, your girlfriend, your secret debt, the ethics investigation at your firm, and your pale face? I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. I know everything now. Angela isn't what you think, and this whole situation isn't what you think. Then explain it to me. I challenged you to explain why you humiliated our daughter at her baby shower, and why you took out a second mortgage without my consent, because finances were too complicated for me to understand. You'll regret what you've done, Teresa. I built everything we have. Without me, you wouldn't even know how to manage these assets. I smiled, a sincere smile that seemed to unnerve him. Knowledge. Explain why you've been lying to me for months, or even years. Gregory's expression hardened instead of answering. That's where you're wrong. I've learned quite a bit recently. I advise you to speak with your lawyer about 3 days after my altercation with Gregory in the parking lot. I had an unexpected visitor at my apartment. The concierge called to inform me that Angela Blackwood was requesting to see me. I debated, saying no, but my curiosity led me to say, "Send her up." And a few minutes later, I was standing face to face with the woman who had waved. "Mrs. Callahan," she said in a tight voice, "thank you for seeing me. I assume you have something important to say." I said, not inviting her to the awkward baby shower for our daughter. She was younger than me, probably in her early 30s, but not the 20-something trophy I had imagined. She wore a conservative pantsuit and minimal makeup, looking more like a business professional than a home wrecker. "I need to tell you something about Gregory that you deserve to know," Angela said, taking a deep breath. I pointed to the couch, against my better judgment, and she sat on the edge holding her purse tightly like a shield. "I'm not having an affair with your husband," she said bluntly. "I never was." I gave a sharp, unhumorous chuckle. "I had no idea it was a family event until I arrived, and by then it was too awkward to leave," she said. "You'll pardon me if I don't believe you." I was at my daughter's baby shower waving when my husband announced he was leaving me for someone who truly appreciates him. "I was there because Gregory insisted," she said. "He told me it was a business brunch." Her face caused me to hesitate. "So why the wave? Why the announcement?" For the next hour, Angela told me a story that rocked the foundations of everything. "Because Gregory has been manipulating both of us, I'm not his girlfriend. I'm his victim," Angela said, her eyes welling with tears. I believed that she had been a client of Gregory's at the investment firm. Gregory had been tasked with managing the young widow's portfolio after her husband passed away. But over time, he started making illegal investments, charging exorbitant fees, and eventually taking money away to pay off his own growing debts. When I found out what he had done, I threatened to report him, Angela said. Stated, the manipulation began at that point. He told me that no one would believe me, and that he could make it appear as though I had given my okay for everything. He claimed to have contacts that might destroy my career. Why are you just now telling me this? I asked, still skeptical but increasingly disturbed, because I finally presented evidence of his actions to the firm's ethics board yesterday, and they opened a formal investigation. Gregory called me last night, threatening me once more and saying that you had stolen his money. That's when I realized you might also be in danger. She took out a flash drive from her bag, which contained copies of all the documents and falsified statements. After Angela left, I sat stunned in my living room with the flash drive heavy in my palm. I wasn't sure if I should believe her story, but I knew someone who could help me confirm it, so I called Valerie, my financial advisor, and set up an instant meeting after looking over the authorizations. This is serious, Teresa, Valerie said grimly. These aren't just ethical violations. They're potentially criminal. I felt sick because the man I had married, the father of my children, hadn't just betrayed me with another woman. He had committed fraud and possibly ruined lives. Now, I had evidence that could send him to prison. That night, as I stared at the city, she verified what Angela had told me with documents on the drive. The following week unfolded like a slow-motion car crash, with Gregory's firm placing him on administrative leave while they conducted their investigation. Our divorce proceedings were temporarily put on hold while both legal teams processed the new information, and Jennifer was briefly hospitalized with. Even though I struggled with what to do about Angela's evidence, I remained resolutely calm. You have a powerful bargaining chip, Elizabeth said. William flew back to Columbus from Portland, determined to mend things between his parents before the baby arrived. Stress-induced high blood pressure put her at risk for pregnancy complications. We could use this to negotiate a very favorable settlement, or I could turn everything over to the authorities, was the advice given at our most recent meeting. Let Gregory face the legal consequences of his actions, I retorted. Elizabeth's face was expressionless. That's probably a possibility, but think about how a public controversy, and though I knew she was correct, if Gregory were to go to prison, there would be no alimony, possibly fewer assets to divide, and a stigma that would affect our entire family. The idea of letting him get away with his actions still gnawed at me. A potential criminal case would affect your children, your grandchild, and ultimately your own financial security. The firm's internal investigation is growing, and I received a call from 2 more of Gregory's former clients who said they had discovered inconsistencies in their accounts as well. It became evident to me that I didn't need to bring Gregory down, because his own actions were already doing that. Instead, I needed to protect myself, my kids, and yes, even Angela and the other victims. I called Elizabeth for an urgent meeting and presented our counteroffer to Gregory's settlement proposal, which included the following demands: full ownership of both properties, 70% of all investment accounts, a lump sum alimony payment instead of monthly support, and, above all, complete disassociation from any liability pertaining to Gregory's professional misconduct. Gregory will never accept this. The settlement meeting took place in a conference room at Elizabeth's law firm, and when Gregory and his lawyer showed up, I was shocked to see how much he had aged in just 2 weeks. He had deep lines on his face and his hair, and I said confidently, "He will, because I'm offering him something in exchange for my silence." Elizabeth started moving folders across the table, as it appeared that Mrs. Callahan had read your proposal and had a counteroffer. Gregory's lawyer glanced over the papers, raising his eyebrows and declaring, "This is totally irrational." "Is it because I asked Gregory directly? Given what I know I think your work position is really generous." Gregory's face is pale. "What are you talking about?" Gregory's lawyer interrupted. "You're bluffing." And I turned to Elizabeth. "Angela, Blackwood came to see me," I said quietly. "She shared some very interesting documentation about your investment practices." "This contains copies of everything we have," she said, nodding and pulling out a thumb drive. "We haven't shared this information with authorities yet, but rest assured we will if necessary." Gregory and his lawyer went outside to confer, and I could see them through the conference room's glass wall. Gregory was making frantic gestures, and his lawyer was speaking in a hushed, urgent tone. "We'll accept the terms," his lawyer said, sternly when they returned, "with one modification. My client requests ongoing visitation rights with his future grandchild." Despite everything, Gregory was still a father and soon-to-be grandfather, which even I couldn't take away from him. Gregory's surrender was visible in his posture when they returned. Gregory looked up, his face showing a look of surprise. "Agreed," I said, "as long as he takes an ethics course in financial counseling." "Why would you stipulate that because our grandchild deserves a grandfather who understands right from wrong?" I replied simply, "Something you seem to have forgotten along the way." 2 hours later, his papers were signed and notarized. The day Jennifer gave birth to Eliza Grace Gregory, my 38-year marriage was essentially over. Gregory and I sat on opposite sides of the hospital room. Our new reality solidified in the awkward silence between us, but nothing else mattered when our daughter placed that small bundle in my arms. I was a grandmother, starting a new chapter in my life. Gregory's career in financial services was permanently ended, and he moved to a small apartment across town, started therapy, and started the humble process of starting over. For my part, I sold our family home. Gregory's professional world fell apart completely, and the firm's investigation grew to include regulatory authorities. He managed to avoid criminal charges through a cooperation agreement. I traveled to places I'd always wanted to see, like the Grand Canyon, New York City, and even a 2-week tour of Italy, and I moved into my apartment permanently. I also volunteered at the library where I used to work, reading to children twice a week, and I gradually started to mend the relationships that had been harmed by Gregory's betrayal and my own painful but necessary response. "You know," Dorothy said, when I thought about this as I gazed out at the Columbus skyline, which was golden in the setting sun, while we were having dinner on my balcony that evening. "You've completely transformed this past year. You're not the same Teresa I've known for decades." I gently corrected her, and I finally let her come out. Reflecting on my journey from betrayal to empowerment, I came to see that the best retaliation wasn't found in the possessions I acquired or the honor I upheld, but rather in realizing that I had been able to saving me all along.